Hello, and welcome to Crimson Rain. The official simplified Chinese version of Tianguan has been released, and MXTX went ahead and added 10,000 new words to the story. We are lucky enough that there have been some fans on Twitter who have kindly translated some of the additions for us, so I wanted to read through them. I've bookmarked the tweets. Let's read them and let's see what she's added and how it changes the story. This one is apparently from a new plot. The black fog was repelled by its spell, and Shelian landed softly on the ground. Before he could finish breathing, a red shadow suddenly shone in front of his eyes. The man in red had come in front of him at some point and took off his bamboo hat with a single gesture of his hand. The sun was shining brightly, and Shelian was blinded by the flash for a moment. He reached out his hand to block the light and said, "How do you?" But he couldn't finish saying his words because the other side grabbed his wrist forcefully. Shelian looked closer with his eyes wide open. Sanlang? The man was a 16 or 17-year-old boy with stunningly beautiful eyebrows and eyes. He was dressed in a red maple saddle suit and had a silver girdle tied to his slim waist. On his hands, he wore sparkly deerskin gloves. Who could it be if not Hua Cheng, whom he hadn't seen for many days? Hua Cheng took his hand, bowed his head. A pair of sterling silver maple leaf earrings swayed lightly on his cheeks. He raised his eyebrows and said with a smile, "Where is this Taoist priest from? It's very rude looking at people." Shelian had not seen Hua Cheng for a long time and was happy to see him at first. But when he opened his mouth, he slapped him with a punch, so he could not help feeling angry and funny, and said, "You grabbed me first. I just looked. How is it? Am I the one being rude?" I think the main thing for this passage is Hua Cheng's outfit, and it really does tie in a lot with Manhua Hua Cheng, who is always impeccably dressed. I really like this part, and I hope we get the rest of this chapter. Okay. Someone said, MXTX noticed the amount of jewelry Star Ember put on Hua Cheng and decided to make it canon. It looks like when Shelian first goes to Paradise Manor during the Gambler's Den arc, so let's see how the scene progresses. At first, Hua Cheng wanted Shelian to remain at Paradise Manor and hold a banquet, but once Shelian heard the words, holding a banquet, he knew it would inevitably be grand and extravagant. Shelian took the initiative to propose that they head out for a walk and casually find a little something to eat. Hua Cheng agreed. Shelian then borrowed a set of clean clothes from him. Strange to say, although Hua Cheng's stature is taller than his, the set of red clothes that Shelian borrowed was coincidentally well-fitting. When he walked out, Hua Cheng had also changed his clothes. A thin red thread braided into his hair. His waist and wrist also had red tassels around them. He was initially at the hall with his hands behind his back, thinking deeply about something. When he turned his head and saw Shelian parting the curtains and coming out, he seemed to be slightly stunned. Seeing his expression, Shelian was also taken aback for a moment, thinking to himself that perhaps he was dressed inappropriately and subconsciously lowered the beaded curtains slightly. From between the gaps of the pearls and jade, he asked, "What's wrong? Does it look very weird?" Hua Cheng's expression quickly recovered to normal, smiling as he said, "Nothing's wrong. It's not weird at all. Very good." Okay, so he did borrow a red robe, and I think Shelian looked so stunning in it, and Hua Cheng was clearly speechless. It's very, very cute, and I think it makes total sense that Hua Cheng would actually have sets of clothes in Shelian's size, and I love this little scene. Ooh! Okay, here's one with Hua Cheng being in a child's body. Shelian hugged him, smiled, and went to the store, ready to pay. Hua Cheng's body is not cheap. Hua Cheng's clothing is not cheap. Shelian usually has no pocket money, and he would never enter such a shop, but he has saved a small amount of money to repair the house. I don't want to worry about other things now. I bought clothes for Hua Cheng first. Just as he was carefully looking at the kanban, one by one, Hua Cheng squeezed in front of him and slapped a piece of gold leaf in front of the shopkeeper. Okay, then everyone was speechless. Hua Cheng said, "No need to look for it. Brother, let's go." He pulled the corner of Shilian's clothes and walked out of the store first with his hands behind his back. Shilian was dragged away for a long time before pulling himself out of the epicenter. "Sunlang, I'm so ashamed of you like this." Okay, this is Google Translate. I'll move on. Hua Cheng thought for a while and said, "Really? I'm sorry, Gogo. I didn't think carefully. So when I stay in the hotel, I will go to Hui Chao again. Is it okay?" Shilian happily said, "Okay, but as an apology to me, you still have to give me a pinch," he said, and he started. Hua Cheng naturally knew he was simply looking for excuses to pinch his own face, and he had no choice but to let it go. He waited for Shilian to pinch enough, and then he walked forward. But having walked 2 steps, Yuan Yuan retreated and crashed into Shilian's arms. Shilian hugged him with both hands and said, "What's the matter?" When he looked up, he saw a group of menacing figures in the street crowd. So this is when Hua Cheng is young and Shilian buys him clothes. It was just cute. Firstly, that he pinched his cheek, Sunlang knows, and then Sunlang lets him pinch to his heart's content. So cute. This one's just a cute and adorable one. Shilian loved baby Hua Cheng. Shilian would keep him as baby if he could, forever. The two strode past the gates of a temple's main hall. A moment ago, they were still in the human realm. The next step, they stepped into heaven. In the blink of an eye, Shilian was standing in front of an extravagant golden hall. Now, such a situation was familiar to him. First he looked at himself, still wearing a set of light white robes from head to toe, only hugging a branch of snow white and exquisite sprigs. He was barefooted, his entire body without any accessories, except for the golden silk bracelet on his wrist. Clearly, this was the capital of heaven. Before this hall, gods came and went. It was actually lively. Shilian still hadn't figured out what his status was, when a small attendant god came up to welcome and inform him. "The flower god is here." Shilian didn't know whether to laugh or to cry. This time, he actually became the flower god. Raising his head to look, above this main hall, the 3 words, "Yin Yu Temple," was written in bold cursive calligraphy. The horizontal inscribed board was like the temple, all brand new. Shilian immediately understood. Thus, Shilian followed along after the cultivator who was guiding him into the master's study room. The moment he saw that bored and lazing man in white robes on the red sandalwood divan, fiddling with the incense ashes, he discovered that his guess was entirely right. The master in his mind state was indeed Hua Cheng. Once he entered the room, Hua Cheng got up from the divan. Shilian smiled and said, "Master Shidi, your juniors are all so scared of you." Hua Cheng was clad in white from head to toe. He wore his black hair down, his sideburns adorned with white feathers. He wore 3 rings on his right hand with silver chains hanging down. A little less flirtatious and willful, and a little more elegant and dashing. Saying he was a prestigious and upright master and lord, who would dare refuse to obey? He also smiled, saying, "Gogo actually guessed early on that it was me." They seem to go to the heavenly capital in this illusion, like they take a step and suddenly they're in heaven. And Shilian is now the flower god. So if you guys have seen MXTX's interview about Tianguan Sifu, she said that in an earlier draft, Shilian was meant to be a flower god instead of being a martial god. And then she revised it, and in later revisions, he ended up being a martial god. But then she kept that element of the flower with, a flower in one hand, a sword in the other. So it's interesting to see him as a flower god. And again, the outfit sounds really pretty. It sounds like he would look like one of those celestial god statues that you see. And then this is the part where I was a bit confused. So he went to Yin Yu's palace, and then the master was Hua Cheng. Hua Cheng is now dressed in white. So I think this whole excerpt is just about the outfits. Hua Cheng in white, I think, would look so stunning. Just like Shilian in red, Hua Cheng in white would be perfect. It's like they swapped. So someone's saying that this is a scene in the new extras. His Adam's apple bobbed. A long while passed before he said huskily, Such an inappropriate appearance. Shilin immediately said angrily, "What are you saying about yourself? What's inappropriate?" His hair was loose and messy, he was badly dressed, and most importantly, his eye patch wasn't on. By Ho Chang's standards, this kind of look wasn't fit for anyone's eyes. Keeping that in mind, Shilin's voice softened, saying, "Speaking of, why are you thinking about how appropriate your appearance is? If you insist on saying that without thinking, then does it mean that you... He held back his words for a while before forcing out, "Does that mean that there are things you do that are meant to be appropriate?" Shilin's hand was still tightly pulling Ho Chang's sleeve, and he said quietly, "I honestly feel like your original appearance looks really good. How could you misunderstand this? What did I do to make you misunderstand it?" So this is Ho Chang being self-conscious about his appearance, and there's multiple times in the novel where he's self-conscious. And the interesting thing here is that he doesn't have his eye patch on, and we know that's a major source of insecurity for him because he was bullied as a child for that one eye. So he has a bit of a insecurity around that area. So I guess Shilin seeing him without it is something difficult for him, and he feels unattractive. Insecurities are not something that can just go away so easily. So it makes sense that Ho Chang is still not convinced and that he still wants to appear in a different way in front of Shilin. And I like that Shilin is reassuring him. We know that Shilin finds him attractive and that Shilin loves him for more than just the way that he looks. So I like that he's actually asking what is making him misunderstand and trying to bring out from Ho Chang where does this insecurity come from so that he can reassure him and let him know that he finds him attractive either way. So I found one that's them chatting in Puchi Shrine. One of my favorite scenes from the original novel. It's just so emotionally intimate, and yes, they're physically close, but I feel like this is where the walls start to break down and they start to get to know each other. And also, I don't think Ho Chang has ever had the opportunity before then to have an actual deep conversation with Shilin. So this is him also getting to know Shilin as a person and not just the object of his affection. So I want to see what MXTX added to that scene because that's still one of my favorites. The two looked at each other under the lamp, and the red candlelight trembled slightly. The young man's back was covered with candlelight, and his expression could not be seen in the shadows. A short while later, he said, "I think Junwoo must really hate him." Shilin did not expect such an answer and was stunned. "Why do you think so?" Sun Lang said, "Why else would he be banished twice?" Shilin didn't know whether to laugh or to cry, but to do something wrong is to be punished. You can't think that simply. Sun Lang said, "Then what?" Oh, I think it's Sun Lang said, "Then what do you think?" Shilin said, "It's very complicated. You'll understand when you're older." Sun Lang said, "But I want to know now." Such a brat. Shilin said casually, "For example, if you admire or like someone, you won't always be nice to them, or be nice to them no matter what happens." Sun Lang said, "Why not? If it won't, it only means that the so-called liking is nothing great." Shilin tried to put it in another way. So, the only thing you can do to someone is either hating them or liking them? Are there only two attitudes you can choose between? This does sound like Sun Lang's philosophy in life. Sun Lang smiled and asked rhetorically, "Why not? Right is right, wrong is wrong. Love is love, hate is hate. Why can't it be clear and unambiguous?" Shilin, on the other hand, thought what a childish idea that is, that love and hate had a clear demarcation. On the other hand, he thought this is a very cute thing about the youngster. He smiled and no longer refuted, taking off his coat and boots. He had two cursed shackles, one around his neck, the other on his ankle. The young man was staring at the one on his ankle. Sun Lang suddenly said, "Let's not talk about that." Shilin said, "Why suddenly stop talking about it?" Sun Lang said, "Because you don't want to." Ho Chang definitely has that attitude of either he hates someone completely or he loves them and he'll never see anything wrong about them in his eyes. That's just who Ho Chang is, and we love him for it. This one is in the Banyue arc when Shilian gets poisoned and Ho Chang removes the poison for him. In the Donghua, we see him spit it out, and in the Manhua, he drinks it up and he licks his lips like it's so delicious. So this person is saying that this feeds into the Manhua. So let's read it. Right after he said this, Sanlang finally looked up. The red swelling on the back of Shilian's hand had gone down, and Sanlang's lips were stained with blood. His eyes were extremely cold, and he moved his glare to the unconscious snake on the ground. There was a loud boom, and the snake abruptly exploded into a purplish red pool of blood and flesh. Then the new addition is Sanlang finally raised his head. The redness and the swelling on the back of Shilian's hands has disappeared, but there is a gleam of blood around his lips, and his eyes are extremely cold. Shilian finally took back his hand, heaved a sigh of relief, and felt that he had regained his composure. He smiled and said, "Thank you. Wait, where's the poisonous blood?" Okay, so this is it's like a little tidbit that shows that Sanlang swallowed the blood, which is, I guess it like sort of brings in that little bit of intimacy and closeness, because of course the traditional Chinese version has censored out a lot of the close moments between Hualien, so MXTX made it canon. Ho Chang swallowed the blood. It's canon, now we can believe it. Okay, so now there's a new swing scene. There was a swing under a tree. Under the guidance of Ho Chang, Shilian unconsciously sat on it, and only after sitting for a while, he remembered that he was the only one sitting on it. "Why don't you sit down?" Ho Chang gently pushed him back again and smiled. Of course, only one person can sit on the swing. Otherwise, who would push him? Shilian couldn't help but laugh. "So why did you make a swing? Can't you make a pavilion or something so we can both sit together?" However, Ho Chang did not respond, but stood behind him and really pushed him gently. Shilian liked to play on a swing as a teenager, but he didn't know how many centuries had passed since he was pushed like that. We know in the novel it's mentioned that Shilian likes to swing, and Ho Chang even makes a statue of him in the Cave of 10,000 Gods, him on the swing. And it sounds like Ho Chang built a swing for Shilian. This is so sweet, and I love, love, love the scene. I think for most of us, it's so nostalgic and comforting to do something that we loved as a child. And so Shilian sharing this with Ho Chang, sharing this moment, it's as though he's sharing that comfort and that joy he felt as a child with Ho Chang, and then building those new memories as well. So I'm going to end on a sweet note. This one says it's a sweet spoiler of Hualien having a domestic life. In the following days, Ho Chang asked Shilian to accompany him to different places under the pretext of helping. Quiet small villages, majestic imperial towns, deep mountains, and century-old forests. Ho Chang told him some local customs wherever they went. Sometimes it turned out to be a place Shilian had been to, so Shilian talked to him about it. The two discovered that they had left different footprints in many of the same places, but they often overlooked them from side to side. Shilian said, "Reading thousands of books is not as good as traveling thousands of miles. No wonder Sanlang is well informed. I used to always feel like you've been to a lot of places, and it's true." Ho Chang laughed and said softly, "Gaga, haven't you been to many places too? It's a pity we haven't met after so long. I'm so happy to see you in the future." So that is a very cute scene. So MXTX did also say that for the 800 years, they weren't able to meet because of luck, and it's sort of implied in the novel as well. And it seems like they traveled to so many of the same places together, but they didn't manage to meet, which is kind of bittersweet. But it's so lovely to have this little excerpt end with Ho Chang saying that he's so happy that he now gets to do this with Shilian, whereas before they each did it alone. So there are a few more excerpts. Those are just the ones I found and the ones that we read together. And I really loved reading these. Have you guys read these, and have you read any others that you really liked? Let me know. And just what are your feelings about the additions in general? I've made a video before about MXTX revising the story, and MXTX did say in her author's note that if you don't like the new revisions and if you don't accept them, you can just accept the older story as the canon story. She's writing them because she feels like she wants to write them. And we can see that she's writing a few of the things that she even mentioned in that note, where she wanted to add these things to the story. And then the other reason is, of course, the simplified Chinese version is censored. So there are things that the Chinese fans won't get in the story. So she's added some moments to make up for that, so that the end result of the story is the same. I've loved every scene I read so far. I think it just deepens the relationship between the two and adds a few cute and funny moments. So I'm not super upset about the fact that there were revisions. So that was it for this video. Thank you so much for watching it. I really hope you enjoy the rest of your day, and I'll see you guys soon.